There are many different types of data. Variables are grouped by their data type, which determines what kind of information it can hold. We have numeric data and we have character data. Numeric can be split out into two separate kinds of data. We have integers and we have floating point numbers. So floating point is anything that has a decimal place in it. Integer variables can only hold whole numbers. There are many reasons to use variables in a program, most specifically because it makes it easier to edit the program and to run the program. One of the nice things about variables is if you have it set up at the top, if you have it initialized at the top, then when you run the program, this is calculating a price for the pizza that starts with a base price of $8. If I want to change that, I don't have to go through and find every single time in my program that I use the words base price. Instead, I can just change it up here in the variable, and then when I run it, it changes the price. So it's changed that variable value throughout the entire program. When you're programming the variables for your programs, you have to think about a few different things. You have to consider the largest and smallest numbers that may be stored in the variable, and if it matches what you think the user might be entering for the values. You have to consider how much memory the variable uses. The more memory your variables use, the slower your program's going to run. You have to consider whether the variable stores signed or unsigned numbers, and think about the number of decimal places of precision the variable has. On the screen is a chart of integer data types that is from our book. You'll notice that we have short ints. Those are the ones you'll be using most often, but they only cover a small range of numbers. We also have unsigned short ints, which covers slightly higher range of numbers, but it doesn't go negative. We have int and unsigned int, long and unsigned long ints. They cover the same ranges. And then we have the long int and the unsigned long, which covers some really big numbers. Unsigned data types can only store non-negative numbers, so only use them if you know for certain a variable will never be negative. For your program today, you're going to be writing IntDeclare. So you're going to declare 3 integer variables for the following data: the coldest temperature recorded in Colorado, the miles driven in a cross-country trip, the number of days since the artist Michelangelo was born, and you're going to initialize them to these variables respectively. So when you're outputting the variable values, make sure that you're using the best, most appropriate integer data types for your variables. Make sure you output descriptive words, not just the numbers. For example, you might output the coldest temperature recorded in Colorado was -61. You're going to output the values stored inside the variables. Do not hard code output. So hard coding is whenever you type the number out inside your sentence. That is a very bad thing to do inside of programming. You will be using 3 cout statements, no more, no less. And please make sure you format your code and your output with white space and or blank lines, and don't forget to include full comments. So we have not yet learned any of the character data types. We haven't talked about constants, and we haven't talked about doubles, but we did just talk about int. So our variables, whenever we go to write them, are going to be ints. So whenever you're coming up with a name for the variables, they have to be very good names. They have to be descriptive. So you need to make it so that when I look at the variable name, I know exactly what that variable is for. So for the coldest temp recorded in Colorado, I'm going to write it coldest CO temp. Notice it is all one word. My capitals are in the middle there, kind of splitting up the different words. The second variable is the miles driven in a cross-country trip. I'm going to write miles driven. So what I'm using there is called camel case. It means that everything is a lowercase except the first letter of any words that start inside the name. It just makes it easier to see where the words are separated. And then the final variable is the number of days since the artist Michelangelo was born. So I'm going to call it num days born. That's not the best one, but I feel like that would be a really, really long name if I put all the information in there. We are going to set it equal to values. So the first one is -61. The second value is 4,276. And the last one is 199,237. We are not CNing anything yet because we haven't learned how to do that. We are not doing equations yet because we have not learned anything to do that. So you are going to fill out all of the data types, and you're going to fill out the chart, and you're going to make sure that you have stuff in your notes before you turn in your plan. All right, to set up our program, remember you have to start each program at the top with those 3 comments. We're going to start with the program name itself, then the programmer's name, and a purpose. This program will. And the purpose of our program for us is that it's going to use integer variables for the first time. The purpose of the program for the user is going to output 3 numbers using integer variables instead of hard coding the information. All right. And of course we have to have our preprocessor file, so #include IOStream just to make it work. We're going to be using namespace standard to make it a lot easier to write the program lines. We have to declare our main function. We know it's a function because there are parentheses on both sides. And then we set up our curly braces where everything's going to live. I like to set up the end of the program before I get down there just so I have everything ready to go. Inside your program, you're going to have a section for variables, which you're actually going to have 3 of this time. So this is where you definitely declare them. All variables have to be declared at the top of the program. Although you may not initialize them up there, they do need to be declared up there, and we will talk about declarations versus initializations in the future. You are also going to have a section where you output your facts. And so make sure that you are couting, and remember it said we're going to have 3 cout statements. So 3 lines of output. So that sets up your program for this program.